Oh, dadgum, I gotta redo this video. I got the title of the song wrong. Well, first off, how you doing? It's Mr. DJ. I'm back from, well, actually, I just finished counting down a fantasy playlist for my first Millennium channel. One from 2016, and before that I took 4 months off to recharge my batteries to prevent burnout. Don't want to get burned out on this. So I'm back on the 80s and 90s YouTube channel. It's been months. How you doing? Mr. DJ back, counting down fantasy playlist of June the 4th, 1984. A lot of these songs on here are standards. Rod Stewart, CC Top, you remember all these. Chicago, Bruce Springsteen, Huey Lewis and the News, but got a few Lost 45s on here. I love those Lost 45s, and probably get into some of these top 40 extras later on, which is really getting deep into the obscure file. But let's get started on the top 40. And at number 40, boy, it is a Lost 45. But I remember watching the video Night Tracks. That's where I got all my new music from back in 1984. Actually, in the early to mid 80s. Well, mid to late 80s. Got all that new music from Night Tracks, WTBS. Watching those videos late Friday and Saturday night. Boy, had a whopping good time watching those videos. Fire Incorporated at number 40. Tonight is what it means to be young. On my fantasy playlist, I had it written down as tonight is what it means to be in love. So I had to redo the video. Fire and Core. Okay, let's start from the top. It's from a soundtrack of a film. You might remember the film. Of course, I know from 1984 you remember Purple Rain. You remember the soundtrack to Purple Rain, and of course Footloose. But there was a movie called Streets of Fire. And on the soundtrack, Dan Hartman had a huge hit off the soundtrack. The Figs had a hit off the soundtrack. All that coming up on my fantasy playlist later on. The movie itself grossed about $8 million in North America. But it either went over budget by $14 million or it took about $14 million to make the movie, so it lost money. But still, the videos to these songs were played all over, splashed all across Night Tracks back in the late spring and summer of '84. Fire Incorporated was a band, sort of a band, that was assembled by Jim Steinman. Jim Steinman, the guy who composed and helped produced, well, Todd Rundgren produced it too, Bad Out of Hell by Meatloaf, had this production wizardry. I mean, if you heard of Jim Steinman, trying to collect my thoughts, well, he was a fantastic producer. Some of the hit records that he produced, Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler, Making Love Out of Nothing at All by Air Supply, and Read 'em and Weep by Barry Manilow. Had that Jim Steinman touch. All the bells and whistles in his production technique. Of course, now you're saying, I'm sure there's probably a guy watching this video with long black hair and a leather jacket saying, Barry Manilow and Air Supply, man, that's not rock and roll. Did this guy produce any rock and roll? I want to listen to Barry Manilow. Although that Read 'em and Weep was a brilliant record. But that aside, yes indeed, Jim Steinman, he produced. Remember the song This Corrosion by Sisters of Mercy? It was a hit in England. And I remember watching the video here on MTV, 1987, 1988, produced by Jim Steinman. Jim Steinman produced this record. He produced 2 songs off the soundtrack of Streets of Fire, and this was one of them. Tonight is what it means to be young. 2 female vocalists on this record, Laurie Sargent and Holly Sherwood. Found out some interesting tidbits about Holly Sherwood. Early on in the early 70s, Holly Sherwood, both of these women had phenomenal voices. Holly Sherwood, she did a version of Day by Day by Godspell. Remember the Godspell's version of Day by Day, huge record back in the summer of '72. Well, she did a version of it, didn't do too well, although it did chart. Her version did chart in England. But the Holly Sherwood version of Day by Day, produced by Tony Orlando. and she sings on Total Eclipse of the Heart. She was a backup vocalist. She worked as a backup vocalist for Jim Steinman and his productions. Holly Sherwood, she sang backup on Total Eclipse of the Heart. Her voice was featured on that song. You can hear it. Man, that was some great singing on that record, Total Eclipse of the Heart. Dynamic production by Jim Steinman. Holly Sherwood, she sings on this record. Tonight is what it means to be young. The song only got as high as number 80 on Billboard's Hot 100. Obscure, but I love those obscure records. Love to get into them. Doing a lot better on my fancy playlist though, although it is hanging on at Dear Life at number 40. Well, static from number 40 the previous week on my fancy playlist of June the 4th, 1984. It is Fire Incorporated. Tonight is what it means to be young.